Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be recapping Day 4 of the third round of the NHL playoffs. And so it is Game 2 between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Islanders in this Eastern Conference Finals. The Islanders were looking just like Vegas had done the previous day to tie up their series at 1, but instead the Lightning would take the victory 2-1 and take a 2-0 lead, a commanding 2-0 lead in this series. And this one started off quite well for the Islanders after a disastrous 8-2 loss in Game 1. They come out swinging here early in the first period and get the first goal of this game from Matt Martin within just the first 90 seconds of it. However, that would do it for the Islanders scoring for the rest of the entire game. Eventually, the Lightning would tie it up late in the first period to put it 1-1, and then we would see no more scoring until the Lightning in the dying seconds would unleash a flurry of opportunities onto Varlamov, finally ending with Kucherov's goal off of a cross-ice pass from Ryan McDonough in the last 8 seconds, I believe, of the game to take it for the Lightning. Good news for them. They win this game. It's not in the same manner as the previous one was. Obviously, you're not going to win games every time by scoring 8 goals, but we had seen the Lightning show that they were able to win tight, close, grinding style of games back in round 1 against the Columbus Blue Jackets. They were probably going to have to do the same thing a lot here in this series against the Islanders, and that's exactly what they managed to do. Were the Lightning far and away the team in this game? Definitely not. Were they even the better team in general? You could argue one way or the other. But the fact remains is that the Lightning scored 2 goals, the Islanders only scored 1 goal, and so they grinded out this victory thanks to this late Kucherov goal. It was another great game from Vasilevsky, a solid game from the Lightning defense, great penalty killing from them, and just an all-around pretty well managed game from the Lightning side. They have the 2-0 series lead. Of course, the major bad news coming out of this game for the Lightning is the potential injury to Brayden Point. He left the game, returned for a bit, but then left again, as has seemingly been the case for a lot of these players getting injured during these playoffs thus far. We don't know the actual severity of this Brayden Point injury, but Point has likely been the Lightning's best forward throughout the vast majority of these playoffs, and so losing him would be pretty disastrous. The Lightning are already without Steven Stamkos for the entirety of these playoffs thus far, and so losing Brayden Point on top of that, losing their top 2 centers, you could say, though Stamkos has been playing the wing more often than not when he has played. Though losing 2 of their top forwards is not a great thing. Can they still win this series even with these injuries, even with this Brayden Point injury if he's out long term? Potentially, but it definitely will hurt their chances. On the Islanders side, the good news for them is, like I said, they did bounce back quite well. It was not a disastrous game like Game 1. They played pretty well throughout this one. It was a decently well played game. They got great goaltending actually from great, maybe a bit of a exaggeration. They got very solid goaltending from Varlamov. Obviously, Trotz was put in a position where going with Greiss, going with Varlamov, neither seemed like the best option. So what I had said, go with Greiss, because he had been a bit more consistent, I guess you could say, and only having one bad start to a game might not be so damning. However, when it came to Varlamov, Trotz decided to go back to what worked right back at the start. Now that Greiss has shown that he's not necessarily this unbeatable goaltender, go back to what worked when you were doing very, very well earlier on in these playoffs. That was Varlamov, and Varlamov rewards with a much better performance here than his last few games. Only lets in a couple of goals, still gets outdueled by Vasilevsky, but still, we'll see Varlamov if he can continue to try and take the net back here as the starting goaltender for the Islanders. The bad news for the Islanders is that this was a very winnable game on their side. They had so many opportunities to try and get more than the 1 goal that they did score in this game. They had a 5-on-3 within the last few minutes of the third period, couldn't score on the 40 seconds of 5-on-3 there. They had a full 5-minute power play after an Alex Killorn boarding major. Back in the first period, they couldn't even extend their lead from the 1-0 lead that they had. And so this is one that by the end of it, having lost 2-1 in such a disastrous fashion here in the last 8 seconds of this game, such a crushing factor, the only thing that the Islanders could really have on their mind is that this was a game that definitely got away from them. This was a game that they had every opportunity to win, but in the end, find themselves trailing 2-0 in this series. So that is bad news in the fact that this was one that they definitely could have won, but you could also view it in sort of a way as good news because it does mean that they are much more competitive in this series. It seemed as though after that game 1 that maybe the Lightning would just outclass them every which way, but here in game 2 it was a lot more competitive, and so while the Lightning could technically finish out this series rather quickly, it seems as though the Islanders will at the very least put up a reasonable fight through those last few games. But that will do it for this recap. In terms of my prediction, I had said the Lightning would win it in 6 games. They're now up 2-0 in this series, and so the Lightning do feel like they're on their way to taking the series. Whether or not the Islanders will get a couple of games or maybe make the comeback, I'm not sure, but right now it's looking pretty good. Class dismissed.